So this is a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. There we go. Welcome to the Seattle Fire Applicant Workshop. The goal and purpose really of me being here is to give applicants an overview of our entire testing selection process for the City of Seattle Fire Department. Like John said, I work in a different department outside of the fire department in the centralized Seattle Department of Human Resources, and it's one of my sole jobs to put on entry level and promotional exams for the fire department, and I assist with the police department as well. I know, because I see it all the time, every day, that testing creates a lot of anxiety. It's a tough process. It's a lengthy process. So one of my overall goals is to try and make it as easy for you as possible. And one of the ways that I try and do that is to reduce that anxiety that you may have by sharing the process and the steps and giving you a preview so you have a very realistic understanding of what the steps are. And so when you go to register and do all those steps, it won't be like you're seeing this all for the first time. So hopefully it's a very good preview. And I know that there are many of you who have experience using National Testing Network. So some of this might be redundant for you, but hang in there with us. All right, so here is our agenda. So I'm talking about the overview. I'll be reiterating those application and testing windows. I use a lot of, let's say, instructing through repetition. So you're going to hear some of this information from me several times. I'll describe the components of the fire team PSSA 1 that are required for the City of Seattle, and talk a little bit about our civil service oral board process, and end up with some general test taking tips, preparation tips before we get into our Q&A. All right, let's start with that examination overview. So I'm going to go into these more in depth, but these are the 5 steps that we'll be talking about: how to apply through governmentjobs.com, the steps to register and schedule with NTN, taking your public safety self-assessment or PSSA Part 1. I'll try and say PSSA going forward, taking the fire team exam, and participating in those civil service oral boards. Okay, so as John mentioned, our application window is coming up. And one of the differences for the City of Seattle is that we require that you fill out a City of Seattle application. For many smaller jurisdictions, fire districts, they have a test company manage their candidates for them, and they do all of the testing, all of the collating, and then they just shoot you a list at the end of the process. That's a big difference between the City of Seattle and those smaller districts or jurisdictions. We do all of that in-house. And so in order to match up your exam scores, we need to have an application for you in our system. And one of the reasons why that's such a strong requirement is because you may be on this eligibility list for 2 years, and we manage that in-house as well. So I need a record of you applying and going through our process to make sure that I can track you throughout the life of this process. So specifically, our web address is governmentjobs.com/careers/Seattle. And I know that the fire department is just excellent in getting that information out to you. So when the job does go live, I'm fairly positive, like 99.99% positive, that it will go out to an email to all the folks who were on their email distribution list. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these even more granularly, more on a granular level in a moment, but here are those steps for NTN processing. Like I mentioned, NTN is our test vendor, so we use an outside third-party provider to do our testing. And that means that we contract with them to provide the service to our candidates. So basically what you're going to need to do is go to nationaltestingnetwork.com and ensure you have a profile. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that in the next slide. For the City of Seattle, completion of the PSSA 1 or the Public Safety Self-Assessment Part 1 is required. That's not a requirement for all departments and jurisdictions. They get to decide what they need for their test. And so if it keeps pinging you and sending you an email every day to finish your PSSA 1, that means you've applied to a job that requires it. And if you want the pinging to stop, please go in and complete that test. You'll need to confirm, if you haven't taken a test already, all the appointments, whether it's online or in person, and definitely read this confirmation, the email information that's sent to you from NTN. And I can't stress enough to be prepared, show up on time, log into your online administration on time. Basically, what do they say in the fire service? On time is late and early is on time. If you are late to any of your proctored exams, they will count that as a no-show. And unfortunately, you won't be able to reschedule it because I think they have they won't be able to reschedule it unless you gave notice. So we'll get to that in a second, but that also goes along with like test as soon as possible. And then your test scores, please send them to Seattle if you've already completed an application. That would be super helpful. All right, so more in depth. So when you go in and set up a profile in NTN at the nationaltestingnetwork.com, you can enter in all your contact information, create a profile, and from there you'll need to search for the job ad for Seattle and make sure that you indicate that you are applying for that Seattle job and schedule and register for your fire team exam. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a few moments, but we also accept department ads through the standard department ad process. Again, you'll receive a ton of information about NTN, about where to show up if you'd like to test in person, or the technology requirements and your appointment if you're testing online. Please read that as carefully as you can. There are a lot of folks who sometimes don't look at the technology requirements of like how fast your internet is or what kind of operating system you have to have in order to do online testing. And it's really good to read that information and make sure that you have those questions answered before you get to your examination day. The PSSA 1, you don't have to make an appointment for. You can complete it almost anytime, day or night, from a secure location because it's an online administered questionnaire that's not connected with the fire team. Like you don't have to sit down with the other fire team components. You can do the PSSA 1 at a different time. Okay, those dates again, in case we missed it. The application window is going to open October 4th, and it's going to run through November 29th. The testing window is going to open that same day because we know that folks can do the department ad and they can do that as soon as the application window opens. And so we have that opened up simultaneously, but you'll notice that the testing window is offset. So you have, almost more than a week to finish testing if you decide to apply on November 29. We don't want to have the application window and the testing window on the same date because people will hear about jobs in different ways. They might hear from a friend that Seattle is hiring. They might learn online if they go to firehouse.com forums or something like that. And so we want to give some folks some leeway as soon as they find out about that job opening that they can make arrangements for taking that test. So that's why we have that offset. Okay, so I talked about this briefly, but there are really two options for you to take or submit your fire team examination. The first option is that you can take a fresh test. So if you've never had an account with NTN before, or you decided that it's been a few years, you want to take it again, you can schedule a test either in person or online, whatever is convenient for you, and that will result in a new exam score. So as you know, NTN, some of you may know, sorry, NTN stores valid scores for about a year, 1 year. And so if you have one in the system and you take a test, that score will replace your old score. Option 2, you're fine with the score that you have. You have one on file. It's been less than 12 months. You can department add or transfer your score to Seattle, and that uses an existing score that's already in your profile. Now, mechanically, you can only do one of the two because if you submit 1, and then if you go through option 1 and get a new test, and then apply and send it, you're done. But if you try and do option 2, it will actually erase the score, or I'm sorry, the other way around. If you have a score in the system, you can't submit it and then decide to take it again. So we ask that people choose either submit the score that you have or take a new test. But there's no such thing as holding 2 test results in your profile at NTN at the same time. Hopefully I made that make sense. All right, so the option 2, your department ad or transferring, it's the normal department ad that you go through if you're familiar with NTN and already have a profile with them. So if you have an existing score that's sitting in your NTN profile, you can go to the job bulletin for Seattle and then say transfer or department ad, and there'll be a small associated fee with that. One of the things that we would like to remind folks of is that the system that NTN uses is talking about your competitiveness when it comes to scoring. They don't show you a specific percentage or raw score. So if your score falls within the green category, you are one of the top performers taking the exam. The farther to the right the indicator moves, this indicator right here, the more competitive your score is. So we recommend that you base your decision to retake the exam on where you fall on each component. And so we require all 4 components of the fire team, and you'll be able to look individually to see what your score is. And if it's in that green or in the top performers, then you may be in a good position to apply for Seattle. All right. Testing locations. So if you would like to test in person and you live locally, and there's quite a few people who I saw from this area, we have in-person, like brick and mortar testing locations in Everett, Federal Way, Mount Vernon, Olympia, Pasco, and Renton. Plus, there are over 130 locations across the country. So if you go to NTN's website, you may find a location that is convenient to you. And of course, the online administration is also available, and we'll talk a little bit more about making sure you have a good connection for that. But if you are based overseas or you're an active military, that might be the best solution for you. You can test as anywhere that you have a good internet connection. Now, I will warn you that most of these, I'm not sure about Mount Vernon, but most of these other ones, testing locations, you're going to go into a room, sit down at a computer, put on some headphones, and you'll be entering your answers using a mouse on a computer. There are other locations across the country and possibly Mount Vernon, I'm not sure, where you'll be in a big group and you'll be watching the video on a screen and you'll be penciling in your answers on a bubble sheet. If you have a strong preference for which one of those styles work best for you, I encourage you to look into which location offers what. Because typically, like I said, these ones in Western Washington and also Pasco are going to be the computer type test. But there are others that might be paper pencil. So if there's one that works for you, please check it out before you schedule your exam. That's what I just said. You could take the exam where it's fully computerized, or it might require paper and pencil. Okay, some tips for that. Arrive early. You must bring your government issue photo ID. You'll be asked to sign a confidentiality agreement. This is standard test rules, so there'll be no electronic devices allowed, including smartwatches. No outside materials are allowed in the testing room. Everything that you need will be provided to you. There's a zero tolerance for cheating. And if you're going in person, and I believe this is true online as well, that the test won't stop if you get up and go answer the door or check in on a small kid or you need to use the restroom. So I encourage you to select a time and a date where you'll have the least amount of distractions as you can. And someone told me a couple of years ago that there are portions of NTN fire team where they're going to give you a lengthy introduction, and that's where they make a mad dash for the restroom so they know they're not going to miss very much when they get back. Test dates again, October 4 through December 10. All right, so after the test, we ask that you do not discuss any of the test components or their content. It's proprietary information. The City of Seattle will contact you regarding the next steps in the process. And for questions, you can email me, and my email address will be at the very end. All right, so more specifically, what will you face when you get to fire team? Oh, and let me tell you about how we do our scoring. So as you can see, we require 5 components for fire team: the human relations video, the PSSA part 1, which is that separate online questionnaire, a math portion, mechanical reasoning, reading, and then we add the civil service oral board. Let me tell you how the scoring and weighting works for those. For the end of your journey, your final exam score, the human relations portion is weighted at 50%. Your PSSA part 1 is going to be weighted at 25%. Your oral board is weighted at 25%. So those 3 components make up the score that puts you on the ranked register or eligibility list. Math, mechanical reasoning, and reading are all pass-fail. So you could get 100, you could get whatever the pass cutoff rate is. As long as you pass, you're going to move forward. And those do not count towards your weighted score, but they are mandatory. So down here, you must successfully pass all the components, including math, mechanical, reading, human relations, PSSA part 1, in addition to the civil service oral board, to make it onto our final register. Okay, let's talk about PSSA 1. I gotta catch up with my notes here. Okay, so the biggest thing when you register online and create a profile on NTN, I used to see this happen. Hopefully people are more familiar with NTN, and the PSSA 1 was relatively new, but now it's been around for a few years. It's important to remember that this is a test. The PSSA 1 might seem like a fun BuzzFeed quiz, but it's actually a scored part of your test, and you take it from your NTN account. So you would log into your profile and on NTN, and then we'll talk about what that will look like. And I can't stress enough, please be sure to set aside a full hour of uninterrupted time to complete it. I recommend, again, going to a place that has good, reliable internet connection. And it is, I think, a bit easier to do on a desktop or a laptop rather than on your phone. You can do it on your phone, but it may not be easy, and you might miss, like, it's going to be small and there's a Likert scale that you have to go through. And I just recommend giving yourself a bigger screen to do that on. Also very important, can't stress this enough, once you start the PSSA 1, you can't stop it. You can't press pause, you can't press save, you can't go, oh, I got interrupted, I'm going to come back and do it later. No, once you press green go, you have an hour to complete the entire thing. And there are many, many questions we'll talk about in a second. And so you cannot pause, you cannot save your progress. So it's just very important that when you click on the PSSA 1, that you're ready to take the full test. We have to ask that people maintain test security. You have to be alone to take this test. Please don't discuss it with anyone. And it's not a knowledge-based test anyway, so I'm not sure what another person there would help you do. And you can take the PSSA at any time. You don't have to wait till after your fire team. You can do it before, you can do it afterwards, as long as you complete it by the end of the testing window. I hear this a lot. Unfortunately, we deal with a lot of the candidate questions when things go wrong. And I sometimes have people email us and say, hey, I got interrupted during my PSSA 1. We got a call, I got an emergency incident and I had to run out the door and the clock ran out and I didn't finish half of it. I can't do anything about that. I can't reset it. So unfortunately, you need to ensure that you have that time and the space to get it done. You could maybe go take it at a library. You could make childcare arrangements so the kids are out of the house, whatever works best for you. All right, so here's what it looks like when you log into your account, and it'll say things like the public safety self-assessment part 1 is required. So that means some department or jurisdiction that you applied to requires this, and you haven't completed it yet. So Seattle Fire requires it. Click here to start, and that's when your clock is going to start. And that's what I've been talking about in terms of your uninterrupted time. Here's a sample of what the PSSA looks like. You can see, I think this is still true, there are 219 questions. So this is going to take your undivided attention during that time, because that's a lot of questions. You only have about an hour to take it. Now, the last time I took the PSSA one was a few years ago, but I would say that I was done with it in under 40 minutes. So I think that if you can read quickly, it can go kind of quickly, but you can also use that entire time to make sure that you're answering it in the way that you want. But there's not a lot of downtime. You have to go through all 219 questions. It's going to ask you if you agree or disagree with a statement. And here's an example. There'll be a question here. And then this Likert scale, you can either strongly disagree, you're neutral about something, you agree, or you strongly agree. Okay. Next, let's talk about the other components for fire team. And I actually have an orientation video. The thing that I like about this video, and I'm going to try and shave off a couple of minutes of it, it is long. I apologize now, it's about 20 minutes long. But the upside of that is it uses the actual introduction that you'll see in fire team and examples of exactly what you're going to see when you register and take this test. So if you have some nervousness about like how the questions are formatted, what kind of scenarios you'll be presented with, this is an exact preview of what you're going to see. So hopefully this next video part will go well. And I'm going to try and start it about 2 minutes in, because it gives you a repetitive piece of some parts that I've already told you. So stand by.
Components. You will take the Fire Team Human Relations Video Test, Mechanical Test, Reading Test, and Math Test. Starting with the Fire Team Human Relations Video Test. This test is approximately 1 hour. It has 2 parts. It focuses on teamwork and interpersonal relations. For Part 1 of the test, a scenario plays. Then you will choose the best of 4 answer choices. Make sure you listen to and read all answer choices carefully before choosing one. Always choose the best alternative listed. Don't focus on an answer that is not provided. For Part 2, you will be asked how much you agree or disagree with statements that ask you about your attitude regarding some of the department personnel you saw in the test. You will respond with whether you strongly disagree, feel neutral, agree, or strongly agree. You will now watch the Human Relations Test Introduction. This is the actual test introduction, and you will see it again when you take the Fire Team Human Relations Video Test. This is a Human Relations Video Test that has 2 parts. In Part 1, you will see video scenarios depicting firefighters. Each scenario is followed by a question with 4 answers. In Part 2, You'll be asked your opinion about firefighters you saw in Part 1. This is a human relations test focusing on teamwork and public relations. It's a test of your common sense. You don't need experience to answer these questions. This is not a test of your knowledge of any particular policy, codes, or technical aspects of the job. Any information like that may be needed to answer a question will be provided in the test. For instance, at times it is stated that certain personal protective equipment is required. You are not expected to know anything other than what is stated. Base your answers only on information given in the test and your own common sense. This is a test. It is not in any way intended as training or as an example of how firefighters and rescue personnel should handle their jobs. Firefighters may or may not be demonstrating good performance. Sometimes you will see firefighters who make poor choices about what to do. Answer each question based on everything you have seen and heard in the video up to that point. Choose the best option from the 4 available answers. Don't get stuck thinking about answer choices that are not available to you. Also keep in mind, there are no trick questions. Although all the answers may not be equal in terms of common sense, they would all be choices available to the firefighters in the scenarios. In no case is an answer wrong because the choice would not be possible. Pay attention to the behaviors and actions of the firefighters and supervisors you see in the scenarios, and consider how it would feel to work with these individuals. In Part 2, you will be asked your opinion about many of the characters you saw. Keep this in mind as you watch Part 1. The video test will now begin. You will now see a demonstration question and answers.
Today's drill is donning an air pack. The time standard is 2 minutes. You need to be proficient. Any questions? Okay, good luck.
I'll go first.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
And go.
Done.
Whoa, just under a minute.
All right, that's my fastest time.
Yeah, good work.
Thanks. Your turn.
All right, I'll get ready.
Ready?
Yep.
Go. Time. Sorry, man. You want to try it again?
Yeah.
All right. All right, second try. Ready? Go. Time. That was better.
Man, let's do it again.
Okay. All right, third try. You got this. You can do it. Ready?
All right.
Go.
Done.
You did it. 1:59.
Yes!
It wasn't pretty, but you got it done. Dinner's in a half an hour. You want to pick this up and go work out until then?
Dinner won't be for half an hour. If you were him, what would you do? A. Go work out with her until dinner. B. Keep practicing the air pack drill until dinner. C. Tell the supervisor you completed the drill in the required time. Ask what she wants you to practice next. D. Relax until after dinner.
Anyone want to
Then
type in the
ask
chat what they
supervisor
think the
what you
best
should do
answer is?
next. Answer B, keep practicing the air pack drill until dinner, is the best answer. It shows recognition that the firefighter needs more practice with getting his gear on quickly and smoothly. Being persistent in practicing to overcome any level of clumsiness and learning to don his gear quickly and smoothly is the highest priority here. Answer A, go work out with her until dinner, is not the best answer. This firefighter only barely completed the drill on time, with only 1 second to spare. He struggled several times, and as the other firefighter said, it wasn't pretty. He clearly needs more practice putting on his gear quickly and smoothly, and should do that instead of going to work out. Answer C, tell the supervisor you completed the drill in the required time, ask what she wants you to practice next, is not the best answer. This firefighter may have finished in the required time, but he should not be satisfied with his clumsy performance of this critical task. He should continue practicing until he can do it quickly and smoothly. Answer D, relax until after dinner, then ask the supervisor what you should do next, is not the best answer. This firefighter may have finished in the required time, but he should not be satisfied with his clumsy performance of this critical task. He should continue practicing until he can do this quickly and smoothly. This answer is also poor in that the firefighter should not choose to spend his time unproductively by relaxing. You will now see another demonstration question.
Who is it?
Fire department.
Grandpa, did you call the fire department?
Yes, I did. Come on in.
Hello, sir. I'm Brad with the fire department. You called for an ambulance. What seems to be the problem?
I ran out of my blood pressure and medication, and I can't drive. I tried to get my grandson to go to the pharmacy earlier, but he's got this new video game. He's been playing it all day long, and he won't leave it.
It's not my job to take care of you.
See? Anyway, since I ran out, I didn't take my dose earlier, and I don't feel quite right.
Okay, you don't feel right. Are you feeling ill, sir? Are you in pain?
Neither. I just feel like I haven't taken my medicine.
Okay. You feeling weak or dizzy?
No, I just missed my medicine.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and check your vital signs if you don't mind. So everything looks okay, and you don't appear to be in any discomfort at this moment. So the best option would be for you to go to the hospital tonight so you can get your medication.
I have to go to the hospital?
It's the only place at this time of night that you can get medication. Would it be okay if I spoke to your grandson?
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, we've checked out your grandfather and everything seems okay. The best option for him right now would be for you to take him to the hospital so he could get his medication. It's the only place that's open this time of night. Would you be willing to do that? Sir?
What, were you talking to me?
Yes.
I'm on level 6.
Yeah, looks like a fun game, but maybe you could help out right now by taking your grandfather to get his medication?
No, I'm busy. What do we pay you guys for? It's not my job. I mean, you're here anyway.
Which of the following would be best to do at this point? A. Stop trying to convince the grandson. Just take the grandfather to the hospital. B. Tell the grandson to take his grandfather to the hospital now. Make sure he does. C. Tell the grandfather you'll take him to the hospital if he can't convince his grandson to do it, but it isn't fair to people with real emergencies. D. Tell the grandfather he needs to find a way to get his own medicine.
All right, guesses in the chat for this one.
Answer A. Stop trying to convince the grandson. Just take the grandfather to the hospital is the best answer. Both the grandfather and the firefighter have been unable to convince the grandson to help. Further conversation would be useless with this young man who has clearly conveyed that he does not feel any responsibility to help his grandfather. The grandson is not a source of help. The firefighters should resolve the situation as if the grandson were not there. They should take the grandfather to the hospital since he can't drive and will not feel comfortable until he has his medicine. Answer B. Tell the grandson to take his grandfather to the hospital now. Make sure he does, is not the best answer. This young man has clearly conveyed that he does not feel any responsibility to help his grandfather. Attempting to force him to take his grandfather to the hospital would escalate the situation for everyone. It would make for a very uncomfortable situation for the grandfather, regardless of how it turned out. Additionally, just because the grandson is young doesn't make it appropriate for the firefighter to order him around. Answer C, tell the grandfather you'll take him to the hospital if he can't convince his grandson to do it, but it isn't fair to people with real emergencies, is not the best answer. The young man has clearly conveyed that he is not going to take his grandfather to the hospital. The grandfather needs to go to the hospital and can't drive. He was uncomfortable enough to call for emergency assistance, and his concern will not be resolved until he has his medication. If the firefighters are going to take him to the hospital, there is no reason to try to make him feel bad about it, especially since nothing else can be done. Answer D, tell the grandfather he needs to find a way to get his own medicine, is not the best answer. The grandfather would not have called for emergency assistance if he had a way to get his medication. If the firefighters leave him, they have not resolved the situation that they were called to deal with. Even if nothing were to happen to him, he may call for emergency assistance again tonight because he is still worried. The next component is the fire team mechanical test. The mechanical test is approximately 30 minutes. You will be introduced to a fictional brick factory. This tests for basic mechanical reasoning. You will now see the mechanical test introduction, followed by a demonstration question. This introduction is the actual test introduction you will see when you take the test. This is a mechanical aptitude test. You don't need specialized education, just common sense based on observation of the world around you. The setting for these general mechanical aptitude questions is a simple system where plastic bricks are made. To answer the questions, imagine you are the operator of this system. Here is how the system works. This bin is a hopper. It's filled with recycled plastic material. You can control how much of this material is let out onto the conveyor belt by using this control. From the conveyor belt, the material drops onto this shaker tray in the washing station. The spray water comes from this narrow washing supply tank. The bottom of the shaker tray is mesh, so wash water passes through this filter into the sump tank down here. Then it gets pumped back up into the washing supply tank. Even though some of the water splashes out or is lost in other ways, most of it gets recycled through the system. If too much water is lost, the wide tank on the right contains fresh water that can be added to the washing supply tank by opening this valve. After washing, material continues to the grinding station, where any large chunks get ground down. Then the material is spread on the conveyor belt that takes it through the melting station. The melted material flows out of the oven here, into this holding tank, with anything solid being filtered out here. The melted material is then pumped up to the mixing station. Material needed for one batch is measured in the yellow cylinder. You can see that red dye and white fiberglass are also measured and then blended with the melted material. Blended batches are dumped into the molding tank and poured through spouts into molds. The hot liquid bricks are cooled here and come out hard. Finally, at the quality control station, the finished bricks are inspected. Each one passes over a scale, and if the weight isn't right, the brick is rejected. Also, from the control room, the system operator observes the bricks to see if they look right. Bricks that pass inspection go on to the packaging department. The system operator is responsible for continuously observing to make sure there is no waste of materials, no undue strain on the machinery, and no production problems. Anything that does not look right or sound right means that the system may need adjustment or repair. You will now see a demonstration question.
The conveyor belt is uneven, and we need to place a small block under this leg to level it. The belt is turned off. Using this pry bar, what would be the best way to lift the heavy weight of the leg so the block can be slipped under it? A, this way. B, this way. Or C, this way.
Any guesses?
The correct answer is B, giving you proper leverage to lift the conveyor belt. The other options either provide no mechanical advantage or a mechanical disadvantage. The next component is the reading test. It is approximately 6 minutes long. This is a reading test based on typical materials you would have to read on the job. For the reading test, you will read a passage that includes a series of fill-in-the-blank questions. You will choose the correct word from 4 answer choices provided. For each missing word, only one of the 4 answers provided makes sense. This is an example of how the reading test works. The test may look different depending on which location you are testing at. This passage is entitled Reporting Accidents. Reporting accidents. Report all accidents on or near your vehicle, no matter how trivial they may seem. Get the names of all persons blank or involved. Secure names and addresses of persons blank injury. Also, get information on occupants of other blank, persons standing near the injured, and property owners. You can see this blank is question number 1. The choices are A, paying, B, detected, C, rewarded, or D, injured. The choices for number 2 are here. The choices for number 3 are here. For each question in the test, decide which of the 4 words is the best choice to fill in the blank. Only one of the 4 words makes sense. The correct answer for example question number 1 is D, injured. Get the names of all persons injured or involved. Again, only one of the 4 answers provided makes sense. The only answers that make sense in the example are 1. D, injured. 2. C, claiming. 3. B, vehicles. The last component is the math test. This test covers basic subtraction, addition, division, multiplication, and estimating proportions. You will perform all the math mentally. No notes or written calculations are permitted. No calculators are permitted. Listen carefully to the question that is being asked. You will now see a demonstration question. The fire engine carries 30 sections of hose. If firefighters take 10 sections off, How many sections are left on the engine? "30 sections minus 10 sections equals 20. The answer is 20. Here are some general test-taking tips to help you do your best. Make sure you visit the National Testing Network website to read about the Fire Team Test. Visit the Frequently Asked Questions page and take the Fire Team Practice Test. Get the amount of sleep that leaves you alert. Not too much, not too little. And remember, arrive at the testing center early to get checked in and seated. Best of luck.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on through our agenda here. So once you've completed your PSSA 1, you've taken your fire team, you've filled out an application so we can marry that application to your score that you get in NTN. If you successfully pass all of those components, you will be invited to participate in the Civil Service Oral Boards process for the City of Seattle. So a little bit about the oral boards. They are developed by NTN in conjunction with SFD and the City of Seattle. They are designed to measure critical knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for the position. And they're scored by a panel of assessors using standard score sheets that are the same for every single person who goes through. And assessors are trained by the NTN staff and go through an equity training that's provided by the city as well. So I'm going to stop here for a second and talk a little bit about the difference between an oral board and a business interview. I would say in one word, the major difference between an oral board and an interview is its structure. An oral board is highly structured. You will get a set amount of questions, a set amount of time, and you will be asked the same questions in the same order. Every candidate will be asked the same questions in the same order and given the same amount of time. So it is extremely consistent and highly structured. There isn't a back and forth, so someone is not going to stop you and try and clarify, what did you mean by that? Or can you talk about this thing that's on your resume? They don't have access to your resume at an oral board. So if you think of it, it really is more like you verbally presenting your resume to a panel. It's very important to kind of understand the difference, that there's not going to be a follow-up question to please tease out more information. I would say this can be, and I'm trying not to be stereotypical, but this can be a challenge who have previous experience for those who've been in the military, because a lot of your training is to give like short, direct answers and quickly. But in an oral board, I'm making these numbers up, but let's say you have 20 minutes to answer 6 questions. It's up to you to manage your time to make sure that you get full, comprehensive answers to each one of those questions and you use up that time wisely. The board typically is not going to say, hey, you left out a bunch of your work experience. A, they don't know what your work experience is. And B, the obligation is on you to fill in as much as you can as long as you're answering the question that the panel is asking you. So again, highly structured. So more details about that, the invitation will come from us here at the City of Seattle. We'll send out a list of dates and times that you can self-schedule as it works for you. Oral boards right now are tentatively scheduled for January and February of 2025. So as you can imagine, the last time we did an open application period for the City of Seattle, we had over 3,000 applications. And so it takes a tremendous amount of time to finish all the testing, do all the scoring, report back the scoring, and then start the interview or oral board process. And so it will take that much time for us to get back to you. And you will have at least 2 weeks to travel to the in-person oral boards. All of our oral boards are done in the Seattle area. And so you will need to appear in person. They are not conducted remotely or over video. Like I said, they're structured, set number of questions with a time response. Dress your best. This is like an interview, so you are showing up to people who are assessing you. And I think that when you put on your best clothes and practice, it gives you that mindset to take it very seriously and to present yourself in the best light. Business or business casual is suggested, but you wear what is considered your best for you. I don't expect someone to run out and buy a full 3-piece suit for an oral board. You do not have to do that. And you're not being graded on what you wear. Okay. Oral board presentation tips. Arrive early. Like you've heard me say multiple times, if you arrive late for your oral board appointment, you will not be allowed to participate. You'll be turned away at the door. And unfortunately, I'll be one of the folks telling folks, no, I'm sorry you missed your appointment and there is no rescheduling. And that is really rough. So give yourself a buffer of time as much as you can to make sure that you have time to get to the location, park or walk to wherever you need to go, maybe use the restroom before you start, center yourself or whatever it is before you come into your oral board. But if you're late, unfortunately, you'll be turned away. Please prepare by understanding the job and the department. It's a great way to learn more about the city of Seattle, about our department, about what makes Seattle different. And I'm sure there are going to be ways that you can share that with a panel. Reflect on your accomplishments and credentials and share them. Again, our oral board people don't look at your application. They don't look at your resume. Those things are done in different steps. They are just assessing the information and the responses that you give to them right in the moment. And so they're making their evaluation solely based on what you tell them. Please don't pretend to be something else. It's helpful to display some confidence and communicate openly. You don't have to self-deprecate or apologize. Like, I know I don't have a lot of experience, but, you know, I'm sorry that I'm less prepared. Like, it's good to appear confident or just leave those parts out because this is the way that you want to put your best foot forward, and apologizing or putting yourself down is not really putting out your best self. I encourage folks to think out loud. You're like, okay, I can read the question. Let me repeat it. And you can put some thinking behind it of like, okay, here's how I'm going to answer it, and then proceed to your answer. There's nothing wrong with that. Imagine yourself in the panel's place. Like, what does a well-organized answer sound like when you're practicing? And how would you evaluate a candidate if they sat in front of you? You will need to monitor your own time. We've done this in different ways in the past here at Seattle. We've done individually timed questions, like you have 3 minutes each, or you have 10 minutes or 15 minutes to do all the questions. I can't tell you what's going to be the case this time coming up because it actually hasn't been decided yet. But ultimately, you're the one responsible for your time. When the end of the time comes, you will be cut off, and that will be the end of your oral board. Now, here I said be clear and concise and honest, but I don't mean concise to like one sentence answer. I mean less rambling like I tend to do. Fully answer each question. Please don't make assumptions, especially about what the panelists know about you. In our system, they hardly know anything about you. They know that you are going to show up, and that's about it. And I know this is probably one of the hardest bits of advice I give out for all test takers, promotional, people who are going for battalion chief, people who are going for lieutenant, people who are going for firefighter. Try and relax and do your best. And that is one of the hardest things, but it will serve you well if you can center yourself, get your breathing under control, and really say, okay, I'm going to give this my best shot. Okay, so after the oral boards, you are not to discuss the test process, the oral board questions, the content with anyone. We ask that, again, you try and keep that, not try, but keep it confidential because it is a confidential process. We here in the city of Seattle will contact you regarding the next steps, which will be the publication of the register, basically. And that's estimated to go out in March of 2025. And if you have any questions, you can email me. My email is coming up in just a slide or two, I believe. So there it is. If you have any questions about applying and or testing, those are the realms that I operate in. My email address is firecareers@seattle.gov. If you have general questions about Seattle Fire or the post-testing process, like all the steps that they might describe a bit later that I won't go into in detail, you can hit them up at the email address that John mentioned earlier, sfdrecruitment@seattle.gov. Thanks so much for listening. That was a long presentation. I know we'll get to some great question and answer. We can talk a little bit more about the brick factory if you want, or other questions about how the tests might, things that might be helpful for you. And so I have some folks here who will help me answer some questions generally as well. And I want to say that if you all are as on lock as you were with your guesses in the chat box, then I think you'll do fine. Thank you.
And thank you, Yoshiko. Not only was it comprehensive, it was very, very helpful. I hope that was the case for all of you guys. If you felt like you missed some things along the way, this session is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube. So you can go ahead and watch this again and fill in the gap. And one thing we want to encourage, go and check out the practice exam on the NTN. And also the link on our website has some more additional information that could be helpful in this process. For our second segment, we have a Q&A session. So give yourself about 30 seconds. If you have a question, hold that for now. We're going to bring on three, including Yoshiko, we're going to bring on three panelists, Firefighter Joshua Woods, Hannah Costin, and Dory Towler. And we're going to go through some of the questions that you put in the chat. So if the questions you have, you thought about, go ahead and put that in the chat now. We're going to do this collectively. If you have a question for our firefighter, Joshua Woods, direct it to him. If you have a question directly for Yoshiko, put that in the information. So we're going to do this for about the next 15, 20 minutes. So let's do that. Let's put the questions in the chat. Oh, you guys were so good at answering questions. Okay. Okay, let's go through each one. Should we bring resumes to the oral board? Is the oral board made up of HR, FD, or both?
That's an excellent question. No, you do not have to bring a resume to the oral board. The resume is something that's considered actually in a later process. And so when the fire department asks you for additional personal information, it's a good idea to bring it there. So we don't accept documentation like a cover letter or letters of recommendation or resumes at the oral boards. I think the next part of your question was the composition of the panel. So here at the City of Seattle, we started doing a bit of a mix. And so typically your interview panel or oral board panel will be 3 people. 2 of them will be uniform employees of Seattle Fire, and 1 is going to be a civilian member of a different department here at the city. And so that city personnel represents a community member, and typically they do live in Seattle or in the surrounding area, so they are a community member. And so those will be the 3 folks that will be your assessors or evaluators at the oral boards.
Okay. Are Seattle firefighters red card certified? Josh, Hannah, Dory.
I don't even know what a red card is. I've never. Or Pat, are we red card certified?
You have to get it individually. It's wildland.
It's
fire.
wildland.
Oh, wildland. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So when you get deployed for fighting wildland, that's red card.
Yeah. So that's a no.
We do have some people who have wildland certifications at the department. I'm not sure how you sign up for it, but we do have some people who have that training. Yes.
Okay, when should we schedule our physical tests in this process?
I can answer that. So the candidate physical agility test, that is something that candidates are invited to complete during the screening process. So that's going to be after the register is established in March of 2025. I will be contacting candidates who are at the top of the register to consider them for hire into individual classes. And at that time, they'll receive vouchers for their physical assessment.
Okay, what's the average turnaround time for getting hired, assuming all testing is passed and scored well?
It takes us about 6 months to hire a class from the start, which is submitting your employment information, completing the CPAC, completing a suitability assessment, interview process, post-conditional assessments, and then class. So about 6 months for each class that we hire.
Does Seattle Fire hire every year? No. Okay, that was
We hire classes every year, but we don't open an application period every year. So we hire 2 classes a year, and at this point, we open an application period about once every 2 years.
Absolutely, that's correct, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get your application in during this open process, because our eligibility list, or register as we call it, is good for 2 years, and we may hire up to 4 or 5 classes from that eligibility list.
Sounds like a firefighter Woods question. What are some of the top things interviewers are looking for in the oral board?
Oh, and it's kind of hard because you want to say like you want to dress to impress, right? Which is always good. You know, I'm a strong believer in, you know, look good, feel good. Granted, that doesn't necessarily help the decision as far as your interview or I should say the scaling of your interview, but it's definitely a good thing to do. I would say speak clearly. I would say speak confidently. And ultimately do your research. You know, there are quite a few times we see people that come in that are candidates, or I should say people that interview that just don't have knowledge of the department, and, with no disrespect, but it's not like, any other job. It's not like you're interviewing for, like Home Depot or Foot Locker, and there's nothing wrong with those jobs. It's just a different type of process. And the questions are completely different. And I would say definitely do your homework about the job itself, because the questions, pretty much revolve around those things, right? So, and definitely do some soul searching, right? We know typically the question that most departments ask are like, what have you done to prepare? Why do you want to be a firefighter? Really put some effort into those questions and try to figure out a way to tell your story and how that correlates to being, a Seattle firefighter. I feel like those are good things to definitely practice.
Thank you. I'm in SoCal. Will there be any physical tests I need to take to qualify, such as CPAT? I'm trying to plan all my visits in advance so I can consolidate my time.
Yeah, for out-of-state candidates, as we said, the oral board process in January and February of 2025 is in person. The CPAT needs to be taken at an NTN location. I know there are no NTN locations in California, but there might be one closer to you than in Washington. But that is a test that you would need to travel for. And then other in-person components would be the interview during the screening process, and then during the post-conditional screening, we do ask you to come into Seattle for both the medical assessment and gear fitting. But for out-of-state candidates, we can usually schedule those on 2 back-to-back dates. So at that point, you just need to make the one trip in.
How many recruits are normally in a tower?
I guess you might want to define what you mean by tower, because our tower is our drill tower, right? So it's depending on how many people are in a class running up it and coming down. So it's not really I guess however many people are in the recruit class that period of time.
Yeah. Regarding the test that we saw a presentation for, is that all across the board, other cities, or Seattle specific?
So the presentation I gave is Seattle specific. Other jurisdictions can customize what components they have people take. And these are the components that we're asking and requiring folks to complete for the city of Seattle. So those are specifically the ones that we are looking for as a city.
Out of 3,000 apps last year, how many made it through, hired and made it through the academy?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would say that we tend to hire classes of 30 to 40, and then we tend to have a 75% pass rate in each class. So that's pretty typical of what you can expect for a higher rate.
Can I add? Yeah, sorry about that. Can I add? You kind of want to think of that application pool as a funnel. I like to think of it this way. And so there might be 3,000 people who go in at the very top, but some people will not complete the test or they'll miss the deadline. And so that will decrease that number. Or there may be some people who don't pass. And so that number goes down. And then you have to look at who comes to the oral board. So some people may not make it, may not fit in with their schedule, or they can't travel to Seattle during that time. And so that number will decrease and that funnel keeps going. And then there are some folks who will not be successful in the oral boards. And so the number of people who end up on the register, which is the final product of the testing process, might be closer to 1,200, 1,400 people. In the past, we've had registers that are around 900 people. We've had registers that are around 1,400 people. So those are really the numbers that are left at the end of the process. And so naturally, each step that you go through, there's going to be some loss of folks who decide to do a different job, or they don't complete the process for whatever reason. And so really what you want to see is finding yourself in the top part of that final list.
The next one's to you again. On preparation for the oral board, you mentioned that we should prepare for understanding the job in the department. What makes Seattle so different? Is there a good link or source of information where we can learn more about this?
So I'll try and answer this, but I would love to hear also from Hannah and Firefighter Woods. I think it is about preparation in general for what kind of job that you are going for, in addition to the department itself. So there are many different kinds of fire departments or districts. And so knowing something about the history, mission, values of the Seattle Fire Department, I think would be very important. I think it's good to know what your career growth opportunities are with a department, which is very different than it is at a much smaller district or jurisdiction. I can't point to one place, but I would start with the Seattle Fire website and explore some of the specialty teams that are on that, some of our history, so that we can see as a panel, looking for your preparation and your knowledge about why you want to be a Seattle firefighter. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you are in the Seattle area, one of the best places to get that information is to stop by a station and ask them what makes Seattle different from all the other fire departments, what makes them a great department, what's great about working there, what are the challenges. That would probably be a great source of information if you're able to connect with people who are currently in the department.
I mean, I second all of that information, or third, I guess I should say. You know, one of the biggest things I did to prepare myself and understand, you know, what the Seattle Fire Department has to offer is looking at the annual report. It does a rundown of how many drills you ran, or not drills, but calls we did the previous year, the type of calls we ran, the things we did as far as events for giving back to the community. It shows our mission statement, it shows staffing, it shows pictures. It's just a lot of information about, granted, it's the previous year, it's just a lot of information about what we do, who we are, and not only, you know, on a regular day basis, but what we do for the community and how the community helps us as well. So I feel like that provides tons of information, not to mention just battalions, how many engines we have, you know, specialty teams, like you mentioned earlier, and so forth. And if you have the opportunity, even just coming up to Seattle just for a visit, because I had never been here before when I tested, and just got to see how different it is, because I moved up from Arizona. So just the topography itself, you know, the landscape, the railroads, and it's just so much that the city has to offer. And just, you know, if you've never been here, just coming up and experience it is definitely something to help sell you on the department itself.
Okay, I think we're about halfway point. We'll cut this off around 5:28. So we'll try and cover all the questions, but if your questions didn't get answered, go ahead and email us, okay? When will recruits be notified if they're hired?
That's kind of a tricky question to answer because it depends on which class you're being screened for. But if we take the August 2025 class, which is the first class hired from the new register, as an example, candidates will be completing preconditional screening, so CPAT and suitability assessment in March and April. We have interviews with the fire chief scheduled in May. At that point, based on the results of those interviews, candidates will receive a conditional offer, so that at that point they know that they have a spot in the class if they pass their post-conditional assessments. And then in June and July, they'll be completing their medical assessments, their psych assessments, and their background checks. Once all of those assessments are completed, they'll receive a final offer. So in general, candidates will find out if they receive a conditional offer in May or early June of 2025, and then a final offer a bit closer, probably in July of 2025, before a hire in mid-August 2025, and then I repeat the process again. So it depends on which class you're being screened, but generally about 3 months you'll receive a conditional offer prior to the start of recruit class.
Thank you, Hannah, for that. If we're registered for an EMS course, are we in a realistic position to be applying to positions like this? Is it more common to hire someone with more experience? I have a season of wildland too. Are you guys looking for people with resident position experience?
I would say that especially if you currently have wildland firefighter experience and you're in the process of gaining your EMS certification, you're in a great spot to join the department. Obviously, like all experience, experience working in a similar department may make you a more eligible candidate because you'll be able to bring that experience and the skills that you learned in that role to your interview when you're explaining why it would be a great idea for us to hire you. But that's not the only reason that we hire people. We hire people because they have a lot of other skill sets that we're looking for, such as wildland firefighter experience, medical experience, experience working in the community, experience de-escalating situations, military experience, athletics. There's hundreds of different reasons for us to hire you. So experience in a department similar to Seattle Fire is certainly valuable, but it's not the only thing that we're looking for, and you shouldn't take it as a reason to not apply because you don't have that experience. We can't hire all people from the same background. That it wouldn't be diverse, and it wouldn't work. So just keep that in mind.
Great answer. If a candidate does not have an EMT cert upon the completion of the testing and oral boards, but completes the certification at a later time, can they relay this info to the Seattle Fire Department and potentially have their ranking on the register improved?
I can answer that. You will have the opportunity to provide us with certifications that you've achieved, including an EMT certification, when we reach out to you for you to submit your employment packet. And then after that, at any time, you can send me anything that you want me to add. It will not affect your ranking on the register. So, for example, we won't kick you from 100 to 50 on our list, but we might take whether or not you're currently EMS certified or if you're in the process of becoming certified into account when we are selecting candidates to interview. As you can imagine, we're more likely to bring in candidates to interview if we know that they will be EMT certified upon their hire date. And then obviously having that experience might make you a more eligible candidate or a more competitive candidate because you're able to speak to that experience in your interview, but it won't change your ranking on the register.
That is the absolutely correct answer, and it's well done, Hannah. I love it. The only way that you can improve your score on the register, remember, your score is only made up of 3 things. your score on the fire team human relations video, the PSSA 1 score, and your oral board score. Those together make your final examination score. The only way to improve those is the application of veteran scoring criteria. So if you've been discharged and you are now a veteran or will be in the future, you can add in Washington State anywhere from 5, well, it's either 5 or 10% to your score. But after anyone else takes the exam, that's your score locked in for the length of the register.
Too. This sounds like a Hannah question again. What are your recommendations regarding EMT certification? Like if I was signed up to partake in an EMT class in January through March, will I still be eligible for a position, or do you recommend getting it before applying?
There's no need to get your EMT certification prior to applying, especially at this point with less than a month to the start of the application period. It wouldn't be very feasible. So general rule is you have to be EMT certified before we can hire you into a recruit class. So if you're hoping to join us in August 2025, you need to be EMT certified before August 2025. And of course, if we reach out to you and ask you, are you certified or are you planning to be certified? It's very helpful if you're already in a class, if you already have a plan, if you can say like, yes, I'm going to be certified by this date, I'm going to take the test on this date. One thing to keep in mind is that periodically we will offer candidates an in-house EMT course. We won't have time to do one before the August 2025 class, but I'm hoping we'll do one in the fall leading up to February 2026. So this is for candidates who have gone through the screening and interview process, who we've selected, and we have decided to put through our own EMT course. This can be really valuable because it's a paid temporary position. We bring you on as a full-time temp employee. You learn from our own paramedics, so you're learning to the standard of our own EMT expectations. But it can also be a downside for some people because it takes place in the month and a half leading up to the start of recruit class, when some candidates might be better served learning their skills, learning their knots, becoming physically prepared, not focusing on the EMT aspect of the job, because that's not going to be what they'll be tested on in recruit class. So my general advice is that if you have the opportunity to become EMT certified on your own, not necessarily before you submit an application, but while you're in the process, you should do it, because that opens up a lot more flexibility leading up to recruit class in terms of what you're focusing on. But if that's not an option to you, we do have this really great in-house EMT course that you might want to consider.
Yeah, Hannah. I'm going to go through the next 29 questions in about 2 minutes. Just kidding. Let's cover a few more. Do you retake the PSA every time you retest and submit a new score?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I might have to check in with NTN and make sure I know the answer. Let me get back to you.
Do we take physical tests after all the applications?
Yes, the physical tests are completed after the application and oral board process.
Are there plenty of individuals still considered from previous hiring classes?
I'm not sure what that means, but I will let you know that we are hiring the February 2024 class from the previous register. So there are people who are still on the previous register, but that will be the last class hired from the previous register.
Okay, I think the next one's answered. Let's tackle a few more. I have my California EMT and our EMT. Do I need to switch over to Washington before the hire date, interview date, tower? Obviously, before you get hired on. So we've answered that.
Yeah, and I'll say in terms of out-of-state reciprocity, that's a process that you go through in collaboration with us after you receive your conditional offer. So once you receive your conditional offer, we will also reach out to you with instructions on how to gain reciprocity in Washington State.
And I will direct this last question to Firefighter Woods. What are the most important qualities the department looks for in a candidate, especially those without any prior experience?
Oh man, I would say embracing diversity teamwork, compassion, courage, and having integrity. You guys like that? That was our 5 core values. I feel like those are huge, right? Also, brownie points, if you can put those somehow in your interview question, that'd be awesome. But yeah, that's what we look for, honestly. As Hannah was saying earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that you get hired if you worked for a previous department before, you know. That's one of the biggest reasons why we don't look at resumes during interviews, right? Because regardless of your background, we take anybody and everybody as long as you can prove that you can do the job, you can talk to the position, and of course check those benchmarks of what is it, like 18 years of age, high school diploma, GED, and Washington driver's license, and speak English. And so it was like, yeah, see, I read that too. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you can really live your life through those core values, that's huge. And speak to those throughout you, not only just in your interview, but throughout your entire career. I mean, I feel like that's huge.
Thank you, Firefighter Woods. Excellent response. We got 2 minutes left for the sake of time. The questions that weren't answered, go ahead and email that. If it somehow got answered, that's good. But if you had different questions, please email us at the email address provided. Couple of plugs, including this webinar that's recorded and the previous webinars. There is one with our fire chief on there. I think it's 2 webinars ago. I would recommend you guys watch that. And the podcast, we put a lot of effort into it. We've released 2 episodes. We have 3 more coming in the subsequent months. And again, it dives deeper into the department, culture, day in the life, and really how to get into the department. We're giving you the inroads. So make sure you check that out. And how to do that, link up with us on social media. Our public affairs team, they do a phenomenal job releasing information to the public. I think that's all for us. Oh, last but not least, please sign up on our website. You can put your email address to receive email updates. Just put that on our website link, and you will get an email saying application window has opened. Something as simple as that. Just a good reminder for you guys. I hope this was helpful. Thank you to Yoshiko. Thank you to Hannah. Thank you to Dory. Thank you to Firefighter Woods. And thank you everybody for spending time with us. All right, take care.